Andreas Bisbikos, our Vice Chair, will ask the second question, starting with Mr. McKinney.
Mr. McKinney.
Mr. McKinney, do you feel that Connecticut's recent gun legislation violated the Second Amendment of the U.S. Constitution in any way? As governor, would you work to repeal the law or support it as written? And finally, would you consider an extension of the firearms registration deadline, or do you support the immediate prosecution of those who fail to meet it?
Thank you for the question. Just to make sure everyone is aware, that's Senate Bill 1160 you're talking about. I did vote for Senate Bill 1160, and as such do not believe it is in violation of either the federal or state constitutions. I believe fundamentally, as an elected representative in our republic, we are your voice in Hartford. I was elected, to represent the people of the 28th district, including the town of Newtown. Had friends at Sandy Hook Elementary School, people I've known for a very long time there. And at the end of the day, the district I represent, different maybe than others, and certainly perhaps the people of Colchester, a majority of my constituents were in favor of that bill. And as their representative, I spoke out on their behalf. I'm the only one who's the voice of the people of Newtown in the state Senate. And I feel an obligation, and I'm proud to have that obligation, to be their voice and to represent them. As governor, I would not put in a bill to repeal the law. I think that is something the legislature might consider, but my focus is going to be on jobs and the economy and turning things around. With respect to the last part of your question, which dealt with what some might call an amnesty period for registration, I fought, and the governor initially said no, and then agreed to allow things that had come in after January 1st to be applications that came in to be allowed, and I would be open for a registration period. I would not support, not now or ever, the government going and knocking on people's doors to find out if their guns are registered.
Thank you. Mr. Poole.
Yeah, I'm an enthusiastic supporter of the Second Amendment. If I had been governor, which I wish I had been, the bill that, the government's reaction to what happened in Newtown, which we all know was a terrible tragedy, would have been very different. I believe that this was a mental health issue, and the state missed an opportunity to do something for families who have mental health issues. I have a sister who has serious mental health problems. She's been in my care for over 30 years, and I know how challenging it is for families who have people with mental health problems, particularly when they're young or in middle age. I think that if the legislature did try and reduce the burden on law-abiding citizens from the current gun bill, I would certainly support that and sign it as governor. I've actually looked into whether or not the governor can pardon people if this governor tried to prosecute people for not registering on time. And in fact, the governor doesn't have the ability to pardon people, but the governor does appoint the commission that pardons people, and so I not only would extend it, but I would make sure that nobody was prosecuted under that provision of the law.
Thank you. Mr. Loretta.
I think it would be premature to say that a governor could repeal the gun bill. You rely on the state legislature to be doing things like that in terms of enacting legislation or repealing legislation. However, I am a supporter of personal rights under the Constitution, Second Amendment, First Amendment. I think our founding principles that have made this country great, and I have seen an erosion of those principles over the course of time, and I think that the intrusion of government is very wrong. I do think that there was a missed opportunity in the state legislative agenda last year. I too believe that the mental health issue deserves more attention. I also believe that the video game industry got a free pass. If people in this country think for a minute that video games don't impact young and impressionable minds as they're growing through their teens, I would respectfully disagree with that and ask them to take a second look at it, because it's my belief that it does. And so, having said that, I think it's important that we understand that we can't legislate behavior. People do things that they shouldn't do. It has been going on since the beginning of time. We need to take more personal responsibility and ownership for our actions. And I think that that's where my focus would be.
Thank you. Mr. Visconti.
I entered the race April 4th, 2013, the day the governor signed the gun bill. I carry a gun. I've carried a gun for 30 years. I have a permit to carry. I think the bill is unconstitutional at the federal level and the state of Connecticut level. Article 1, Section 15 states, every person has a right to bear arms in defense of himself and the state. There's no Second Amendment, well-regulated militia clause in the Connecticut State Constitution. I think it went too far. I would put a bill forward to repeal the law. And I also stated last week that I would also use executive powers to stop what I believe is coming, which is confiscation in one form or another. And here's how I think that will go down. The information systems that the state police have now are being upgraded. I think they're going to be able to cross-check the guns that I own, which the state police have a copy, the serial number, date purchased, and know what that gun came with, how many magazines it came with, or what the number of bullets that came in the magazine on the gun I carry. That information is already in their hands. So I believe this is a big problem in the works. Mike Lawler, I believe, is the architect for what's coming. It will come next year at the beginning process. So I will use executive powers. Some people told me, well, that may be against the Constitution. Well, Governor Malloy and President Obama have used executive authority against the Constitution. So in post-Constitution America, I use all the authority I can to not enforce confiscation at any level.
Thank you. Ms. Deane.
Well, I'd like to say that we must obey the Constitution. I do not support a governor doing what the worst public officials have done in office just because the same has been done previously. So I do not believe we should act through executive order. But let me just say on the Second Amendment that I am a strong supporter of the Second Amendment. I am part of a legal team, I'm local counsel to the national team that is challenging the constitutionality of this new post-Newtown firearms law. I've won an award in 2012 from the NRA for fighting for freedom here and Second Amendment rights here in Connecticut. I defend shooting ranges in Connecticut and around the country. It's not primarily what I do, but I have developed quite a reputation for it, and so far we've won every case. So I now train other lawyers around the country to do the same. But let me just say that I'm somebody who likes to deal with facts and I deal with principles. Not with polls, not with what people who are misinformed think when a pollster calls. And the facts are that when you increase gun ownership of all types that are in common usage with law-abiding citizens, that crime related to guns goes down. And so we have two large studies that came out in 2013 which show this. One by the U.S. Department of Justice, the other by Pew. And they both show that from 1994 to 2011, this is during the time when the federal assault weapon ban was phased out, that that gun-related crime went down during this time period nationwide 70%, and gun-related homicides went down during this period 40%. This is a huge drop.
Thank you very much, Ms. Deane. Now, Mr. Healy will ask the second question. Oh.
We're good? What they said. You got me? All right, here we go. Look, everybody's had an opportunity to opine on the bill. Let me just say this. I think one of the great failings of that particular piece of legislation is that it didn't do two things. One, or did very little for two things. One is that we have a mental health care crisis in this country and in the state, and I see it every day in the city of Danbury in terms of people that are seriously ill that we are not affecting. It goes much broader than just necessarily people that are violent, but the point is that we're not putting the resources into the mental health care system, and this bill really didn't do anything to address that. Two, we really didn't do what I think we needed to do for school safety and security. In Danbury, we have 22 public schools. And the governor proposed $15 million for all of the schools in the state of Connecticut, and then added $15 million. This is the same governor who just gave a hedge fund $115 million to move from Westport to Stamford. So if we're really serious about keeping our kids safe and secure, we need to put more resources. Finally, I just want to quickly talk about the process. One of the things I found most frustrating for lawful, legal, law-abiding gun owners was that they went to the Capitol in the thousands, and they testified in public hearings, and they were patted on the head and told to go home, and this bill was negotiated behind closed doors without public input and without anybody really being able to be heard about it. I would, as governor, would certainly entertain some well-thought-out, well-reasoned amendments that would address the most burdensome parts of this particular law, and bills can be brought forward by sportsmen, by Democrats, by Republicans, by whomever.
Thank you.